bit more about this with our White House correspondent, Mary Alice Parks, who's at a polling station there in Georgia, along with Sarah Isgur, ABC News contributor and former official in the Trump Justice Department, along with Amanda Renteria, also an ABC News contributor and former national political director for Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. Mary Alice, let's start with you. You just heard our conversation with the head of the GOP there in Georgia. Assuming that he wins tonight, can Brian Kemp get reelected without the support of former President Trump?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we're going to see. You know, Stacey Abrams obviously has a ton of money, a ton of national backing and national name recognition, which has really helped her up to this point. She has just amassed a huge war chest, and so it's going to be a tough challenge, a tough go against any of the Republicans, even though obviously this is basically a completely purple and well-divided state. You know, we asked Stacey Abrams how she was going to be able to handle sort of the national headwinds, though, that the party is facing, and she seems sort of eager for this fight. I think this conversation that you were just having is what the Democrats think they can seize on. They see a Republican Party that is still split, sort of split over the realities of the last election, and they think that they can take advantage of that and drive Democratic voters to the polls.
Well, it was interesting listening to David Schaefer. He was a little more mellow than I expected when talking about just the role of the big lie and how it could play tonight. What do you think? What will the role of that be, you think, if any, especially leading up to November?
Well, you mentioned, Kara, some of the conversations we've been having with voters here on the ground, Republican voters that tell us they're just tired of this conversation. They want to talk about the issues. They're ready for the candidates to talk more about the issues. They want to talk about things like you mentioned, inflation, the economy, jobs, health care. Republican voters that are excited to rally behind, for example, Governor Kemp and his record on jobs and business growth here in the state. So I think that we're starting to see some other Republicans feel like they need to soften that language. They don't want to alienate some of their own base. But look, it's not just that governor's race. We're going to see this big lie trickle down to all these down ballot races too. Obviously, voters today are also voting in the primaries, both parties trying to solidify their nominees for Secretary of State. Such a key job that will determine how elections are run here. And we know that right now, one of the late candidates really surging on the Republican side, Congressman Jody Hice, he still denies the reality that Trump lost here in 2020. So if he were to win the nomination and win in November, that would just be it would be astounding for what it could say about you know who's running elections here in Georgia. Kara.
Well, so and then that really lays out the fact that opinions here are still divided. And so, Sarah, let me take it to you. You know, there is infighting still within the Republican Party. So what does that say about the GOP right now?
Well, I think we now have 3 different primary contests that we can compare. In Ohio, Trump's endorsed candidate wins by a wide margin, 10 points. In Pennsylvania, a tie going to a recount. They are now within 1,000 votes out of 1.3 million. And it is a foregone conclusion that Trump's endorsed candidate will lose tonight in Georgia. What'll be interesting is actually the margin. And so we have 3 very different races when we think about Trump's hold on Republican primary voters and exactly what those candidates have run on when they look back on 2020. And of course, we'll have other races, Texas, Alabama, where that has been an issue as well. I think it's been a mixed bag, and I think it says Donald Trump clearly still is important to Republican primary voters, but it's not a lock. And I think it's absolutely true when you look at the data, focus groups, a lot of these voters think the focus should be on Joe Biden, his failed agenda, and a lot less on 2020.
Well, for those, though, that are still focused on this big lie, Sarah, how can you support a party that has essentially jettisoned its commitment to democracy?
I think for a lot of Republican primary voters, they truly believe what Donald Trump has been telling them. They think that the rules were changed midway through the game, or they think that it wasn't litigated in courts. And I think for Republican office holders, they're now having to grapple with the fact, look at the Pennsylvania primary, where there's now a recount and one side is accusing the other side of using Democratic tactics to try to disenfranchise Republican voters. Doug Heye, a Republican political consultant, wrote months ago that Republicans were unprepared for what would happen in a Republican primary where there were accusations of vote rigging. So we're seeing some of those chickens come home to roost within Republican primaries.
There are people that definitely know better, so, they've got to be held accountable as well. Amanda, despite all of this, Democrats are still struggling across the board, not just in Georgia. So why does it seem like their message is still falling flat?
I think we are in a difficult place as a party when you have as many crises that are coming at the government, that are coming at our country, that are coming at our world right now. And what candidates, and what you will see more and more across the board, is candidates are going to be running in their localities, on their states, on their state issues, on their local issues. And so that doesn't drive a national conversation in the ways that you generally see during a presidential, but that does mean each candidate has to figure out for themselves what is the driving message back home. I will say having the back and forth in the GOP conversation does help Democrats really coalesce around what is our message about the integrity of democracy, what is our message about the future vision. People have to remember that elections are about the future. And so if folks on the other side, or even our own candidates, are focused on a past election or a past loyalty, that really isn't where voters are. And so the difficulty right now for Democrats is really figuring out what that message is at a time when so many things are coming at you, and trying to find what is the motivating factor to get folks out. I also want to say is, the chairman talked about SB 202. All across the country, rules have changed. And for every campaign right now, midterm elections are about understanding what are the rules? How are you going to build a system that's going to help voters come out? And so a lot of what the work behind the scenes is for Democrats at the moment is really understanding how do you get your base in a new environment with the new rules that are actually coming as well. And so a lot of folks will be looking at these races to understand what is the messaging, what are the logistics, and where is the GOP going to land, so folks know how to run a race in November.
Yeah, and how did Democrats, turn things around? Mary Alice Parks, Sarah Isker, Amanda Renteria, thank you, ladies, very much. And continuing coverage of the primary elections does continue tonight on ABC News Live Prime. They'll be speaking with lawmakers and bringing you all the results live starting at 7 p.m.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.